Okay. Good evening, everyone. Meeting. In Public International Law, and I will be your moderator today. We are delighted to host the Faculty of Law, University of Belgrade, and we are especially grateful for in this meeting and helping us connect with our today's guest. So I have a pleasure to introduce a lecturer at Bristol Law School, and who will present us very interesting and crisis, its roots, and it will last around. Have some time for questions and discussion. Jacopo, okay. I'm sure that we are all eager to better. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Organize very nice opportunity. I'm really in front of the legal theory group. So it matters very simple. The crux of my paper is very simple indeed. It's almost a banality, and it starts from a question, and that a long European people, European Union, how the Union has grown in depth and in expansion as a proper political subject to sustain of the European Union. I believe the issue of at least of the beginning of a European people, root of the current. And I would like to explore a little bit this problem, and especially to show how and secondly, how this problem is the make the European Union progress positively. So, truism that the European Union is in crisis. It will progress through crises. Pretty normal. This is what generally happens in any human organization, but certainly faced in the last decade or so have been so frequent and so violent that polycrisis, crumbling empire, so to speak. Brexit was a very few predicted, and it is the first time that the European Union is actually losing. I will Brexit is and how Brexit right. I would like to point out more structural crisis that the European Union is facing right now, and the people that have analyzed these crises. And in order to do that, I take as representative of the field for very important authors coming from different directions and offering different diagnoses and solutions. And these four authors are Majone, Giandomenico Majone, Wolfgang Streeck, Jürgen Habermas, and Fabbrini. Now, each author that I will analyze offer their own view of what the European crisis is and offer their own solution to that. However, I would like to point out that all these solutions consistently and quite bafflingly completely forget the problem of the people of Europe. And I'll try to show why this problem is in fact extremely important. So let me start with my literature review. First of all, we have Giandomenico Majone. And Giandomenico Majone, in his recent works, has suggested that the problem of the European Union is that the European Union has homogenized too much, that the European Union has basically posed a straitjacket to the economy and the legal system of each member state, and that this has basically gone against the idea of positive competition that could actually exist between the member states and could make the member states thrive in the context of the global markets. Giandomenico Majone in particular suggests that economic limits are actually what are strangling the European Union, and this is coupled with a problem of democracy. He says that actually the right solution would be to retransform the European Union into a kind of club of nations or clubs of nations that would geometrically align for their economic interests in a much more flexible and loose way than it is right now. As a matter of fact, Majone suggests that it is like this, in this kind of competitive environment, that Europe came to dominate the world, and we should go back to that kind of scheme. So Majone takes a very liberal approach, a very state-centric approach, and we could pose Majone in what we could call the less Europe camp. Less Europe camp. Yes. Within the European Union, yes. Still keep the European Union, but just loosen it up, make it more about economic competitiveness, avoid especially the monetary union, which is considered one of the greatest mistakes the European Union has ever done, and so on and so forth. It is quite interesting that this analysis by Giandomenico Majone is actually echoed by somebody that is coming from a completely different theoretical perspective, Wolfgang Streeck. Wolfgang Streeck is a member, basically, of the hard sociological line of the Frankfurt School. Is an sociological economist, and he suggests that the problem with the European Union is that the European Union has been a capitalistic experiment to basically satisfy the world markets at the cost of national democracies. What Wolfgang Streeck says in a very complex and absolutely beautiful analysis is that the problem of late capitalism have been moved from sphere to democratic to political sphere, in a way that has, hello, hi guys, that has basically emptied the democratic structure of national states in order to make the market satisfied. He makes this example. He says, basically right now, national governments cannot take democratic decision that the market will not like. A very recent example, and this is not just related to the European Union, with the United Kingdom. Liz Truss, the former prime minister, fell precisely because of this reason. The market didn't like her economic plans, and basically they ousted her. So Wolfgang Streeck says this must be stopped. Democracy cannot exist at this level. Market will always take advantage. So what we need to do is to go back to the old school and procedures that actually have helped the expansion of the welfare state and have helped democracy against the power of the market. So it says basically something very similar to what Majone says, but from a completely different perspective. Majone says, let's have less Europe so that we will be more competitive on the markets. Streeck says, let's have less Europe so that we can reignite our democracies. So less Europe. The other camp is more Europe, or at least a different Europe. Jürgen Habermas, of course, is part of this camp. Jürgen Habermas has been one of the foremost defenders of the European project, has been one of the fiercest critique of some of the developments of the European Union. And he has offered some interesting way out for the European Union. He criticizes in particular the fact that the European Union does not give enough power to the European Parliament and instead allows other less democratically rooted institutions, like, for example, the European Council, to take the lead in political decisions. In particular, Jürgen Habermas has suggested that the problem of the European Union is a problem of basically democratic legitimacy seen from an almost ideological point of view. In a reconstruction of the legitimation roots of the European Union, Habermas has suggested that the European Union should see itself as founded by a double pouvoir constituant, a pouvoir constituant of the people of Europe and a pouvoir constituant of the nations forming the European Union, a kind of nested double sovereignty that theoretically should solve, at least from a structural point of view, the predicament the European Union is. So it does propose some changes, especially with regards to the way in which the European Parliament works, the way in which the European Council works, the way in which the Council of Ministers works, the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. But he is not against any kind of resection of the European Union. He says the European Union is the only system where actually democracy can work. It's the only system where all the state can pool their resources and resist the pressures of the market. So exactly the opposite argument proposed by Streeck and Majone. As a matter of fact, Streeck and Habermas have engaged in a very, very fierce debate about so-called small state nostalgia. In the more Europe camp, we also have Fabbrini, Sergio Fabbrini. And Sergio Fabbrini has a kind of more sobering view of the European Union than Habermas. Habermas is critical, is very pessimistic, as a matter of fact, but he still believes that the European Union as a union as it is right now, with some tweaks, can still work, and it is the only way forward. What Fabbrini instead suggests is that the European Union has expanded too fast in a kind of sloppy way, trying to, again, homogenize too much economies and constitutional systems that really didn't work together. So he suggests, in very simple forms, I'm simplifying his argument, to separate, recompose, and reconnect. Let's separate the core European project that share similar economies and similar commitments towards further countries that don't want to do that, of integration, and that therefore are slowing it down and are meddling it up. He doesn't say let's, completely exclude them. He says let's in a way that would be much more efficient for them and for the European Union as a core, would be exactly this kind of operation to reform the European Union in a way it will set the goals and the ambitions on the basis of this resection, on the basis of this reorganization, reignite almost ideologically what the European Union could be.
Europe in
different speeds, Europe a la carte, and yes, but he has a precise vision for that. Whereas, yes, I mean, whereas also because also Majone is about, oh, let's have a huge a la carte. Let's have everybody agree on what they want to agree on, and let's not have a kind of general scheme. Majone says, Fabbrini says, let's have a core Europe that is going in the direction of an ever closer Europe. And then let's have all the other member states that don't want that, but still want to enjoy the economic advantages to be connected with that. So I would count Fabbrini in the more Europe. A better Europe, a Europe that, again, with this kind of double speed, can, however, develop in a more coherent way. Now, if we actually look at the diagnosis, they all agree on some very basic key points. These key points is that the Commission, the European Council, the European Parliament, and the Council of Ministers don't work as they are right now. The Commission is a kind of emasculated government. The European Council is a democratic and political anomaly. The European Parliament, which should be the democratic powerhouse of the European Union, in fact, in terms of political reach. And the Council of Ministers, as a matter of fact, has become a kind of arena where bigger states, especially in economic matters, swing their weight around and actually have their way. Again, the two solutions are different. One is less Europe. With regard to this, how is it possible that are than the European Union, because they have a lesser mass? How would how is it even Germany by themselves would thrive, seeing how much the European, the United States think that democracy only exists at the level of a nation. But the nation state is will have an end. We shouldn't forget that we didn't have states, we have cities rooted in the city. Rome was not an empire, Rome was a city. More Europe. What I found perplexing is basically that they're not just says, well, if we reach, then everything will be probably better. Well, maybe, but maybe not. It is just a natural. On the other hand, a kind of and the constitutional treaty didn't really help to the problem. I think so is that we are lacking a European people. We are lacking basically the motor of an not just from top down. European discussion about the demos, like the no demos thesis. I'm not going back. Think as a European demos, well, clearly there isn't. Clearly it's not there. But why even the beginning? And my suggestion is that the way into is the problem and has led a how am I doing on time?
Well, good, good.
Brief philosophical detour, okay? Roberto Esposito a very interesting idea of etymologically, the word community is an organization that comes with is the sacrifice the must give to the community in order to be part of it. I will not go into the very I'll just remind you of Hobbes. What does Hobbes say? A community is formed when everybody gave up their right the could protect everyone. We see two things. First of all, in this case, the right to everything. And also an immunity comes to the fore. Think, I belong to the community, but in return, immunity from harm, immunity from being basic by this community. Community is modernity. This is exactly what the European Union has done. If you look at it, what is the European Union? But what kind of free movement of people is this? It's a kind of movement of people that focuses on work. Will have to accept other people, European citizen, in your polities, but don't worry. Only if they will contribute to the economy. They will not be part of your polity because they will not be able. They will not become, if they're not economically viable anymore, so the European Union basically night, but we have prevent too much contagion between the states. Now, what is the problem of this? The problem of this is I use theories by this beautiful idea to explain what reification is. Of recognition. When I reify the person, what I'm doing, the person has reasons to act, has plans, has goals, has aims. I'm a partial object. It may make sense for my plans. And this is exactly what happened with Europe. The European citizens into workers. And by doing that, citizens to become part of the polity from a kind of double perspective. Because if I'm a European citizen, and I've been a European citizen in a European country, the United Kingdom, I was not a citizen there until I became a citizen of the United Kingdom. I was always separated. I didn't have an interest in the national politics. And all my votes were for Italy, both at the political level and both at the European level, because I was voting always thinking about what Italy would do, because that was where my allegiance was. Also from the point of view of the host country, seeing European citizens as workers and seeing that they do not participate to the political life, they see them as a kind of external foreign body that is not integrated in any kind of way. This is, for example, the insight on post-functionalist theories of integration. What they have discovered is that the more the European integrates, the more nationalistic parties raise to the top, because they can wave the flag of, oh, Europeans are coming, they're taking our jobs, we need to fight against the European Union. Why? Because they have no incentive to have pro-European policies, because nobody would vote for that. Let's take the example of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, almost 3 million people, which is 5% of the population, almost 5% of the population, that could have swung the vote. In the political election, in the referendum, they were not allowed to vote. And so there was no recognition of the political goals of these people that moved around Europe, that tried to have a new life in Europe, and the policy that was welcoming them. So I think that the whole way in which the European Union has pursued integration has also enough integration, to the point of creating a kind of autoimmunitary crisis. When we are, and the last 10 years of crisis have been basically limitation of resources. And so on and so forth. You obviously turn against the other as the element of what is disrupting your way of life. Giving too much immunitary defenses to the national states have basically created a system that has gone against Europe in general. And again, the United Kingdom is the classical example. The United Kingdom was the country that was very, very different from a constitutional historical point of view from the rest of the European Union, and also had the most opt-outs. So it was the country that to which we gave as many immunitary measures possible to stay the same within the European Union, with the result that it turned against the European Union itself. So what to do to go against this kind of dynamic? Well, of course, being a theorist, I'm not very practical, but I would like to suggest 3 ways of doing that. First of all, to reform the free movement of people within the European Union and liberalize it in the way that the European Court of Justice was doing up to basically 10 years ago, when then it stopped and it went back to its liberalization. Secondly, give the right to vote after a certain period of time to European citizens in the states they reside in. 5 years would sound perfectly reasonable. Not like the United States, which is a compatible model where you really don't have any residency requirement to vote. If you move from one state to the other, I think that the
elections,
not just for European elections, for national political elections. So, for example, an Italian moving to Paris, staying there 5 years, and then being able to vote for the French Assembly, and so on and so forth. In this way, there will be a positive, I think, interpretation between the interest of proper European citizens that are acting and living as European citizens and the national polities. Otherwise, national policies will always be shielded from European decision. It's always be something that comes exactly. Third, because democracy is a substantive thing, also establish a European-wide welfare state that will allow people to move not just as workers, but as European people within Europe. And here I'm connecting with the ideas especially of Elizabeth Anderson of democratic equality. We cannot have democratic equality if we don't give a minimum of subsidies to people to participate democratically in the polities that they are moving to. And here, of course, a kind of more precise and sociological argument about so-called welfare tourism should be made. But I do believe that welfare tourism, in fact, makes extremely little, a neglectable part of migration within Europe. Compared to, you know, people that just want to move and to have a better life and to work for a better life. You know, notoriously, young people move. Young people that can work move because they want to have a better life. That's why they move. So these are my three. This is the problem, the root of the problem, the absence and also the prevention, the foreclosure of the recognition of a European people. And these are my three solutions. I'm still developing the argument. I'm not sure that is as convincing as it should be. There are still some moving parts, but that's the core of it. And I would love to know what you think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacopo. Yes, I think you raised many questions from theoretical and philosophical ones to those quite practical, I'd say. I open the floor for questions and comments. Are there any? No, then I will use my Professor. Sorry, I was no, please, no.
I maybe not speak back to the first and initial premise, but would be a little bit skeptical when you start without any explanation from premise that there is no European people. At the end, you European citizens and European people. So it means that there is no identity with the EU. I think it's not so certain facts to be taken as granted. So just to start from the barometer and from other many Europeans, many citizens of the United States, I think would be ready to say I'm European, not only German or French or Italian. So why do we so much under spectrum this what I'm talking about? And I think that maybe that's exaggerated to say that the problem with this absence of European people is because their citizens are dutiful workers. Are they really to the status of workers? To the functionalist, reified status? I'm not sure that that's true because Europeans also have been experiencing many common fields of common life examples, culture, politics also. I think that something too reducible is in your approach. Okay, later I will put some up.
Okay, but I respect the teacher very much. I think it's because differences in Europe. German citizens have a different way of life, way of culture, way of religion than, for example, a person from Greece. And they have different mentality at the end of the day. There are many, for example, when Greece fell into that crisis, there are many politics, about their way of life, how they spend too much money, how they're not into the savings, and that situation itself, how there's no unity in Europe, and the Europeans see themselves in different matters. So I agree with you on that sentiment. You can, Germans are used to saving money, they're used to reducing their spendings, their costs, they are mainly methodological. The Greeks are more into, we're going to party, we're going to have fun, life is not all about work. And when you put Germans and Greeks together, you can't expect all that to happen with Europeans. On some level, maybe, like democracy and values, but the way of life, they are different. So sorry to interrupt, but like this is okay.
I think some, oh, sorry.
But it is about the Europeans as a single identity, as a single people. That is a counter argument too, because we've seen how it was different for Greeks to handle the crisis from that economic.
Thank you. Damir wanted to add something, I think.
Oh, sorry, what's your name? Alexandra. Yes.
Damir Banovic, domestic and local influence, I think both identities. What I'm very curious, why are we talking constantly about the crisis in Europe or the crisis within the European Union? I mean, since I've been reading this, it's like this idea that we want to see that there's some kind of crisis in the crisis. And still in the literature, there is like saying different story. I think that the and that's quality of life is actually their nation debated a lot. I think there have been some moves over the there is something which is price. I think in academic literature there this price and differ like recruitment price and European Union. Is there something different from this narrative of price is something which is and I think this when you talk about the Germans and then the Greeks, we are so that in Greeks also when it comes to identity and different perspectives of life. This and that about for Boston. That's all.
Identity, or if there's no way similarities.
I mean, you can also choose. I mean, Germans also choose them. I mean, also Italy was created. I mean, Italy first you created Italy, and then you wanted to create the nation. There are ways how you can create. I mean, not maybe with the assimilation, but there are ways how you create something which is identity, which is construction. You also created Italian nation. I mean, the German nation was created.
Yeah.
Very good. I don't think that it's the only problem about identity. I mean, identity can be a plurality, and you can convert this in different perspectives. So, yeah,
Thank you. And Mila, are you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So, Jacopo, thank you for yours. So write books. I'm interested in, so if you move to other country and after 5 years you get a private book in the country, does it mean that you will receive, in your opinion, in your solution, does it mean that you will write a book in your home country? Because I can imagine that, for example, in 20 years, if I'm moving in 4 different countries, I will have write a book in 4 different countries. In Europe, then maybe that will be a nice solution. Then after some time, in 20 or 30 years, a lot of people will be alright vote in different countries, but then integration process will really be on a higher level, but maybe that will be a little less voters or interests, political parties, I don't know, so everything in that direction.
Thank you, Mila, and I will finish with my little remark. I remembered you mentioned Habermas, and
Yes.
I remembered his paper on the Constitution of Europe, and I think that there he referred to his view that we usually make constitutions in situations of crisis. And we did not get that European Constitution, as we all remember. We ended up with the Lisbon Treaty, which is basically the same thing, just doesn't have the magic word.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, what do you think about now? There is crisis. I don't agree with Damer. The crisis is obvious, from illiberal democracies to the war in Ukraine and all that is happening. Do you think that maybe this crisis will change something in that regard? May it lead to some kind of reform of the treaties and maybe transferring more competencies on the institutions and limiting the sovereignty of states more? Those are my thoughts on the matter. So thank you. Now you can.
Thank you very much.
Respond.
All right. So thank you very much for all these questions. They're all very, very interesting. And I also feel that some of them are caused by the fact that, you know, I could only give a presentation in 30 minutes and I could not get into a lot of the details. And also, I don't have all the details that I still want to develop. So let me start with Dragica, which I think immediately identified one of these deficiencies of mine. First of all, is there no European people and are people really being reduced? Well, first of all, what is a people? This is a question that I didn't really ask. And yeah.
People and European
Absolutely.
speak a lot about.
This is part of what I need to develop in my general argument. I will need to develop what I think a people is, what a European people can look like. But I would like to say a couple of things on remarks on what you suggested. First of all, you say, well, there might be a European people because people feel European. What does it mean to feel European? What do these people feel? Because one thing is in Eurobarometer say, oh, I feel European. But then if you ask, yes, but what is the difference between you being a European and you being a German, a Spanish, a Portuguese, and so on and so forth? And I would think that here legal theory actually can help us trying to delineate what it matters for being a people. And what it matters for being a people is to have a voice. To have a voice to citizenship. I mean, this is very banal. I think that all my work is very, very banal. I'm just puzzling together things that have not been puzzled together. In order to be a people, you need to have citizenship. And citizenship is not just the European citizenship, but is actually the capacity of making your voice heard and making your voice matter. It is what Axelon says, struggle for recognition. Recognition is not a nice dance. Recognition is a struggle. It is a fight. It is a wrestling match. So giving the voice to European people that are living abroad to matter in the policy where they live, I think it's absolutely fundamental to define what a people is. And this is connected immediately with what you said, but are they really reified? Well, to the extent that they do not have this kind of voice, to the extent that they only have this kind of passive voice in trying to defend their European rights through the Court of Justice, I do think that they are reified. And that's how they've been included in the European political system. Again, when I vote nationally for my country of origin. But when I vote for the European Union, I mean, I can only affect the polity that I am through my European vote. The way in which I relate to France, to Germany, to Spain, being a foreigner, is always in this roundabout way through Europe. And therefore, my voice will, first my incentive to do that, because it's really a little kind of effect that I'm going to have. It's a little return that I'm having. And secondly, this is always going to make my voice be heard as a kind of external voice. I can say things in front only through the roundabout way of being a European. I can never really interact with my fellow citizens. I can never interact with Macron will not be my president. It's going to be the president that governs my life, but not my president. So in this sense, I do believe that we are facing a kind of reification. If to be a full citizen is to have full citizenship, well, clearly European citizens are not having that. And that's, I think, a form of reification.
Full European citizenship.
I do not know, and I don't think we should have a plan. I should think, however, that we need to start making this voice hearable, and I think that voting rights would be the first way of doing that. Then, sky's the limit. I don't know what will happen. I don't know how this contaminated Europe, and I use here contaminated in a very beautiful term, in the sense of two things that merge together and create something new, will happen. But I think that this has been the limit, the break, that has prevented further integration, that has basically, it's being a falling forward in European Union affairs. So to go back to Alexander, he says, yeah.
Something else to would copy the system of the United States and be a federation? Would there be a separate, would there be a common European citizenship? And would, in that situation, we would have impunity? Because that way we would not have this system, but actual state with actual institutions. And I think only in that scenario we would talk about single European Union. It would be a federation.
Maybe yes. As a matter of fact, the argument of Fabbrini is that the only political experiment that is similar to European Union is either Switzerland or the United States. Compound democracies, he says. Compound democracies are not gold. It's not gold all that glitters. I mean, we're seeing right now how separated the United States are. How their democracy is in deep, deep danger. And Switzerland as a model of democracy, I'm not entirely sure. Let's always remind ourselves that I think that women in Switzerland vote only in the 1970s. Not great, not a great track record, I would like to say. Huh? Yeah, to all due respect to Swiss. I second what Nils says. You know, Greeks are different, Germans are different, but what we need to do is actually how to make this difference integrate with themselves. Because, you know, certainly as an Italian that has lived abroad for 17 years, I'm a different kind of Italian from the Italian that has lived in the same country. And I would be a different Italian from an Italian that has lived in 5 different countries in those 17 years. The point is, I need for this, you know, very, very different voices to be heard, to contribute to the politics, because only including people we can create a thriving democracy. Democracies have never thrived by excluding people, unless you listen to, you know, the Athenians that were really happy about that. Or again, any democracy that has excluded women for most of its existence. So is Europe in crisis? I believe it is. We've talked about crisis for a long, long time. Brexit has been one very good example of the crisis.
Is it in crisis? But why would they have this narrative? Kinetic narrative of crisis, constantly crisis. Is there something without the crisis? Is there something, I think that is so.
I understand you very well, because crisis and conflicts are the part of the
Absolutely, absolutely. 100%, 100%, but 100%. But on the other hand, if I understand you correctly, basically we're in constant state of crisis from one aspect to the other. So I'm focusing on this particular aspect, the democratic aspect. I mean, it is an alarm bell that one of the biggest and most important member states has fallen off. Poland and Hungary are not really going that well. A lot of internal movements in member states are basically challenging the belonging to the European Union. I mean, Meloni, the Meloni government in Italy is, I mean, has arrived there to say, oh, we will fight against Europe. Then, of course, you know, as too often Italian do, they you know, very battling, and then they say, oh no, we're really joking. Sorry, we didn't mean that. But what we're seeing is, I like to think of European democracy as a kind of souffle. Let me use this kind of culinary diet, which grows, and if at a certain point you make it wrong, it will collapse on itself. So the democracy of the European Union has worked up until the point, but then, as post-functionalist theories are suggesting, when European Union affairs become very salient in national democracies, then the European Union becomes a kind of foreign element that we basically have all the incentives to fight against. And I think that my proposal to focus on the birth of European people could be a good counterbalance.
I have only 5 more minutes because of the next.
I'll be very, very quick. Right to vote, practicalities, I don't know. This is something to be balanced. A lot has been written on that. But I don't think that a lot has been written on the democratic legitimation of a right to vote as a European citizen. I don't think that, for example, the idea that if you've lived in more countries, you develop more allegiances and you actually can cast 4 different votes. This, of course, it's absolutely out of the question for many people, but I don't think it's that bad an idea, as a matter of fact. Then finally, with regards to Habermas, sorry, I only wrote Habermas. What was your point on Habermas?
No, it was about the constitution that we make in constant crisis.
Right. Constitutions are great, but constitutions are only the pinnacle of a movement. So as we've seen, they do not paper over all the differences and all the problems. We tried in a moment where the European Union was in a pretty safe state. That's why they pushed for the, but at that point, clearly the post-functionalist trap came forward, and you know the constitution was actually seen as the worst thing that could happen. Again, you need, I guess, both a people and a constitution. You need this kind of serendipitous unity to make everything work.
Brian, did you want quickly? No, we don't have time. Okay. Then I can only thank you once again. It was really a pleasure to have you here, and we hope to
Pleasure to
see
be
you
here.
again at the Belgrade Legal Theory Group. Thank you all for being here today. We will keep in touch for our next meeting, and until then, stay safe.